Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and one last pre-season 4 talk. This time though, we're covering the class rankings based on the theory post-PTR patch notes. We were able to watch as piles of top players tested everything with the loot largely handed to you, and test a lot of the stronger options ourselves as well. A couple days back, we got the patch notes for season 4 post-PTR with the things they've learned and also changed, and naturally, some important details are still up in the air because they haven't commented on them or told us about them. We did get some extra confirmation that super high levels of passives will not be a thing at launch via a content creator interview rather than, I don't know, in your patch notes. So what I'm getting at there is that this is all theory based on the PTR and what changes they've made, what they've actually told us about, and what we just have to assume. However, this is still a pretty accurate assessment because this time we actually got to play it before launch thanks to the PTR. I'm happy to say every class is going to perform very well in season 4, but there's still two clear winners above the rest just in terms of raw output. And finally, it's not Sorcerer and Barbarian again. So let's start from the bottom at number 5. And at the bottom for expected rankings is actually Rogue, which is weird to say because I think Rogue is doing really well. It's got a pile of good builds with one that's probably performing a bit better than the rest. It's easily a competitive class and will do well in the endgame. It's also one of the best levelers, and that's certainly an important part of a new season. Rogue has consistently since pre-season been a well-balanced and high performer. Honestly, the balance for this class is great. It's just overshadowed a bit in season 4 by the overperforming DPS of other classes in comparison. The footage you're looking at is by Mippy, who's constantly high in the ranks of rogues. This is a pit tier 200, cleared in roughly 2 minutes, using the best build in theory, rapid fire. Clearly, it's very good. The potential is very high. It can survive these environments. The issue with the Rogue is that its DPS potential is straight up lower than the other 4 classes. It also requires higher APM in general. More effort, but you're not really getting the same output as everyone else. Also, it's lacking in defenses in exchange for high mobility. The feedback I read by Mippy in a document he made post-PTR was that Rogue should be hitting its fantasy better in the future. The idea for Rogue is fast-paced, high-risk, high-reward. Because the Rogue has basically no consistent defenses, like the other classes, it should be rewarded in another way. Mippy suggests a kind of self-made synergy would be a cool thing if that was on theme. I imagine like a combo style system where after a dash or a teleport you enhance the next ability, or if you use your abilities in a certain order, something like that. It does deserve something fun and unique like that to compensate where it lacks. It's just an issue of their design. In any case, Rogue will clearly do work in season 4, but it does look like their DPS output is lower than the rest. Next up, we have number 4 and actually number 3 as well. I rank both Sorcerer and Barbarian in the same rough bracket because they both have 3 or even 4 builds that are going to perform pretty close in terms of output. Both of these classes had a build in the PTR that was absolutely busted and definitely would have had them higher in these rankings if they weren't nerfed. They were both nerfed in various ways, cut in relative half, leaving them still heavily outdoing, say, the Rogue's output, but just not as stupid as it was. Let's first look at the Sorcerer, which should be dominant in the leveling portion of the season launch. Either way, Sorcerer's a funny one. It's feeling even better in season 4 because of the way that you can enhance your core mechanics, making projectiles bigger, adding projectiles, enhancing the very way that Sorcerer already plays. Part of that led the Frozen Orb build being so busted to the point they nerfed it. The pre-nerf version in the PTR was easily competitive with the top 2 classes, which are also busted. Now it's just incredible compared to busted. There's that unique Fractured Winterglass, an amulet that makes Frozen Orb have a chance to spawn random conjurations that might spawn in more Frozen Orbs, which had a previous 100% rate potential. Also, it was even more busted with the aspect of Frozen Orbit causing more explosions, which is now fixed, and again they've nerfed that lucky hit chance. It's still really good, just not otherworldly busted anymore. But also, it's not the only option for a seriously strong Sorcerer build either. For Sorcerer, there's the classic Ball Lightning and Blizzard builds. Blizzard's great when you've got idle targets or taking your time slowly in like higher content such as pits. Ball Lightning, you can just blast for everything and the damage is following you because it's just these orbiting balls. So anything that touches you just dies. And that's just to start with. There's still a lot of potential there. Since there's 2 classes that are basically brokenly good in terms of output, Sorcerer has to be under them. Even so, it's going to be a top tier leveler, brilliant both defensive and mobility wise, and has multiple very valid build options for true endgame. So Barbarians, I put them joint 4th and 3rd with Sorcerers, most of the same reasons. The ridiculous but genuinely strong as hell Dust Devil build has been nerfed since the PTR. Just like the Sorcerer's Frozen Orb, it was broken in the PTR, the damage was ridiculous, and the actual tornado size was just comical. It covered the entire screen constantly. So not only is the damage really good, but nothing can ever escape it. It's like the largest AoE possible. To combat how silly and broken that was, they put a limit on the size of the tornadoes, reduced the amount of Devil devils spawned on shouts, messed with the size scaling from the fierce winds aspect, and there's a max number of dust devils possible at once, which is 15 now, and they also generally dissipate sooner. On the bright side, they move faster, which is nice, and there are various options to reach that 15 cap as soon as possible. They smacked it down in all those different ways, and yet it's still going to be a top tier build for Barbarian in Season 4, and very likely the best. They still want you to play it. The main aspects are going to be encouraged in this season journey, so you'll be able to get a solid version of the build guaranteed. Barbs in general is still going to perform really well with other options. Bash Barb is incredible and less gear dependent. Hammer of Ancients, while nerfed, is still strong. Charge is still strong with the awesome speed that provides. Their leveling is still going to be one of the worst since they're so dependent on gear and have more gear to collect than the other classes, but I still put them in a really good place, joint with Sorcerer. But obviously there's two classes that have busted potential, and they're still coming based on the new notes and reveals. At second, I have Druid, pretty much entirely because of Tornado, Werewolf, but Hurricane is still very respectable, and even Boulder Druid is kicking ass too. However, Tornado Werewolf is insane, outrageously so. And then you have the benefits of the Werewolf, like the speed on top. What's interesting here is not per hit damage, that isn't so much higher than the Barbs and Sorcerers, but it's how many ticks of that comparably high damage occur constantly. We're talking about millions, hundreds of millions, ticking so many times you can't even keep track of it. There's that very exciting clip of the level 200 Grigore kill where the boss dies in 5 seconds, just brutalized. From the same player, we also have footage of pit level 200 clears in record time, no problem. The exciting detail here is the double cast tornadoes coming from a tempered affix. You have a high chance to get a double cast, and you can trigger it at an extreme rate. The damage of the tornadoes is then pushed by the Thunderstruck legendary node from the Paragon. It increases your damage massively based on damage versus close and distant enemies. Through tempered affixes then, you can push those damage types to really high levels. The result is like the Dust Devil Barb, tons of tornadoes that are dealing ridiculous DPS, but it just hasn't been nerfed like Dust Devil was in so many ways. Because of that, it's going to be hard to argue for other Druid builds just in terms of raw DPS. But again, it's not like Hurricane and Boulder isn't also doing really well, comparable to say Barbarian and Sorcerer. It's just the Werewolf can zoom, and then with this kind of output and pace, it's hard not to say it's an obvious top performer for Season 4. Druid's still going to have a rough time leveling though. You require uniques to play builds like this. Tempest Storm needs to be found, so the sooner you get it, the better, but you know, that's not just going to happen immediately. So once the Druids get past the initial leveling phase, they're going to have a very good time in this season. But above Druids, it's obviously Necromancer, finally. And not just that, Minion Necromancer. Full Summoner as well, which is normally so behind the rest of the options. Where the Druid is hitting hundreds of millions, the Minion Necromancer is hitting billions. There's clips and examples of 4, 5, 6 billion hits in one go with the right combo, which will delete whatever it hits. And that has been nerfed, it's been confirmed. Like I said during an interview with a couple content creators, it was confirmed that the passive stacking is not going to be possible to that degree. But what happens when you take 6 billion and half it? It's still 3 billion. In short, what you could do is stack Golem Mastery, the passive, to get over, say, 20 levels. You could push to 700% times damage on the Golem baseline just from a passive. That's not considering all the other ways you increase the damage, by the way. They removed that and put a cap on it. But at a minimum, we will still be able to get, say, 5 levels added. So at 8 levels total, if that's possible, that's 200% times damage at a baseline. You should have the damage potential of a billion or 2 or even 3 at the highest stages, even post cap nerf thing. That's just the Golem build specifically. You can full minions and then instead focus on mage damage instead, stacking that passive up in a similar way to deal comparable damage, still above the Druid. You could lean heavily into shadow based damage over time minion build for incredible output as well. Or hilariously, there's the Bone Spirit build, which is an absolute monster on the side, competitive easily with Sorcerer and Barb, below the crazy minion stuff. So obviously Necromancer has the highest output and it's going to be the king of the season in that regard, but you're still Necromancer, meaning you're going to be slow as hell compared to everyone else, and you're going to have to stack movement speed passives just to be remotely functional. At least we'll be constantly unstoppable now thanks to our Golem abilities providing that. But minion builds in general rely on woefully poor AI Diablo 4 just has. You do not have direct control over them, and in the PTR we saw many examples of them just stopping and standing there randomly, even with enemies right next to them. So hopefully they fix that, but yeah, they're always awkward. So while this absolutely absolutely is Minion Necromancer season, just be ready for stuff like that. Hopefully one day they'll give us a way to target enemies and have your minions go attack the guy you chose, or something basic like that. Overall, as a Necromancer main, I am really happy that Bone Spear is finally not the top obvious choice, and under everything, we still have things like Infinite Mist, Bone Spear itself, Sever's doing really well. There's lots of room for experimentation on top of the obvious winners. But there you have it. That's my rankings of the classes based on the PTR, the post-PTR patch notes, and further reveals since that as well. Rogue is doing good, but doesn't seem to have the same output as Sorcerer and Barb above that. Druid is dominating above that with a Tornado Werewolf, but Minion Necromancer is somehow even stronger than it all, despite the passive limits being introduced. It's going to be an interesting season, so expect lots of build videos and general coverage here on the channel. But until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.